5 Live Formula One.
Well, after a lengthy delay due to the rain and the visibility, we got underway at Spa-Francorchamps for the Belgian Grand Prix, and it was worth the wait. Oscar Piastri winning the race ahead of his teammate Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc on the podium in third. And to dissect it all alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, is the 1996 F1 World Champion, Damon Hill. I mean, Damon, it was worth the wait, wasn't it? That was a good race.
Yeah, it was a good race. There's action and there was also tension. I think that sometimes people, want to see wheel-to-wheel action and, people banging into each other and that sort of action. But I like the races where you've got a gap and you've got a different strategy and drivers having to watch or make a progress, and you're watching the gap coming down. We saw that in this race with Lando. But for a couple of very costly little mistakes that might seem like nothing to most people, 1.2 seconds here and another maybe 0.8 over there, that was the difference between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri today, between Lando being able to put the pressure on him right up to the very last lap. So we saw a race at the front for the World Championship between these two guys, and we saw some good drives through the field.
So we were delayed by probably about an hour, really, before we got the things underway. First 2-3 laps were under safety car conditions. Then we had a rolling start, which is really quite beneficial for the pole sitter because you're not doing a standing start. The pole sitter was, of course, Lando Norris. And really what became crucial was Oscar Piastri managed to get him on that first proper green flag racing lap on the Kemmel Straight in a brilliant move, and it proved to be critical.
Yeah, we still haven't worked out quite what happened there because Lando said afterwards he wasn't getting his battery pack deployment. So it may be that he pressed the button, something didn't happen, and that's why Oscar Piastri got him on the run up the Kemmel Straight. But also, I think he went a little bit early when the safety car pulled in. I think he didn't quite time the restart in the right way. He went early and tried to get a gap, and then when he got to the final corner, which is actually the start of the run, he made it possible for Oscar to close up the gap under braking for the final corner, and I think Oscar was very close to him round La Source hairpin, made a good run down the hill and was right under his gearbox by the time they got to the top of La Source
Kemmel Straight. Exactly. He practically pushed him out of Eau Rouge over Raidillon and then down the Kemmel Straight where he made the move at the end of the braking zone. This was all done on intermediate tyres because it was still very much changeable conditions when we got this race underway. And then, of course, with a race like that, when it is drying up, there is that tricky crossover period, actually spearheaded in the end by Lewis Hamilton. We'll talk about how great that was for him. But Oscar Piastri, with then track advantage of being the lead driver at McLaren, he can basically get dibs on pitting first. And he did just that. Now, Lando Norris then forced to stay out for another lap. Were there any other options there? Could they have double stacked? Could they both have come in at the same time? Or was that a bit lose-lose for Norris?
Lando could have called it earlier. Lando could have said, I'm coming in now.
Because you were quite irate that no one had come in yet.
Well, I was noticing, it's an incredibly grippy track when you've got high speed around here, and of course the car generates a lot of downforce. So my races in the past round Spa, I've always been astonished at how grippy it is once you go to slick tyres in the wet. And I saw some dry lines, and it was obviously drying lap by lap. It was getting drier and quicker. It was worth a gamble if you'd lost the position already. He could have called it a bit earlier, but by not calling it earlier and them calling in Oscar, I'm guessing that Oscar didn't call that pit stop. I think that they did. Well, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. If he was in the lead, he had the option, but he only has the option if his teammate hasn't called it already.
And I suppose once he was overtaken, he knows that he's lost that advantage of if you're going to pit on the same lap for the change in tyre to the dry tyre, he won't get that priority. Does that then, I suppose, negate the whole thing about Spa is such a long track, over 7 kilometres, it's too risky to come in first or maybe a lap early because it might be bone dry in one bit but soaking wet in another, and it'll negate the advantage?
Well, the thing is, it's a 2-minute lap. And it's changing second by second, and there comes a point where you look at that track and you're going to go, I could do a lap on these. It might be a bit iffy here and there, but I could do a lap on slicks, and sooner or later someone is going to do it. And the first person to do it was Lewis Hamilton, and then the guys at the back, and they all piled in. So the timing was not wrong. Lewis made up, I don't know how many places he made up, but I mean, you go out on a slick tyre on a drying track, you're going to make 10 seconds. The guys who were actually on the intermediates were actually going slower than they had been on intermediates because the tyres were just getting chewed up. It was so dry. So they were losing 2 seconds already. And I think Lewis's first lap on slicks was about 12 seconds a lap quicker than that pace.
I think he made up about 11 positions in the end. So we get the pit stops, we get the crossover point. Oscar Piastri comes in first. He goes on to the medium tyre, heads back out again. Norris has one more lap around on the intermediate tyre. Then he comes in and he's then delivered this question. Do we go for medium tyres like Oscar has, or do we go for the hard tyre and try and go to the end? Now, did he make the right call there, Damon, in going for the hard tyre?
Well, any other time he might have made the right call. I think it was the right call because I don't think he had an option having to have, come in behind Oscar and Oscar already getting out on slicks. He was already shooting off into the distance. So Lando had to do something different. When you've got two guys fighting in the World Championship, as I did with Jacques Villeneuve, Williams, there's not much between us. If you do the same strategy, sometimes it just means you can't get past. So you have to do something different. And so Lando, I think, did the right thing. Nobody knew what was going to happen to the medium, whether it could make it to the end. And the only problem with this race was they made a 2-grade of tyre jump between the hard and the medium. Any other race, it would have been just a 1-step jump. And so the hard was extra hard compared to the medium. And that was equivalent to time as well, quite a big time advantage. I wasn't sure what exactly the number was, but it was a good half a second, I'd say, between the medium and the hard tyre.
Well, in the end, it went the way of Oscar Piastri, who managed to hold on. We'll talk about how he held on. Let's hear from our race winner, though, speaking after taking the checkered flag.
Hey Oscar, congratulations. You took a load of risk at the start, it paid off. Just how happy are you with everything that panned out today?
Very. It was a great race. I knew that trying to take the lead on lap 1 was my best chance of winning. And I was able to make it happen, which is nice. So got a good run out of 1 and then had to be pretty brave through Eau Rouge and try and stay as close as I could, and then got the slipstream and got it done. So very, very happy.
How worried were you about the tyres as well, lasting until the end, and did it get more comfortable the longer it went on?
I think sort of 6 or 7 laps into the stint, I wasn't feeling the best because the tyres were getting a little bit worse already, and I knew we still had a lot of laps left. So at that point I was a bit nervous, but then as I did more and more laps, the pace stayed the same, the deg didn't really get any worse, and just the last 5 or 6 I was probably struggling a bit more. But once I changed a couple of things, I found a fair bit of pace and I was able to hang on.
Great stuff, congrats, thank you.
Was that one of the most impressive drives we've seen from Oscar Piastri so far?
I think every time he goes out, he's more impressive. That's the issue, I think, with Oscar is that he's on a trajectory which is ever upwards. We had him Alain Prost at the Goodwood Festival of Speed talking about how he encouraged Alpine to sign up Oscar Piastri, so he saw something of himself in Oscar Piastri. Now that could be a little bit self-serving, I don't know, but anyway, it's a bit, but he clearly he went on record as saying that he sees something of himself in Oscar Piastri. What do we get with Oscar Piastri? He is as cool as a cucumber. He's neither here nor there, whether he wins or loses. You don't see much. I mean, obviously it's in there. There's the racer instinct that is angry about things. He was a bit cross about, he felt, losing out at Silverstone with the penalty that he had. So he's a tough competitor, but he keeps himself on an even keel, and he didn't leap around too much when he got out of the car at the end.
There was a bit more emotion there than we've seen, I think.
He was very happy.
Yeah.
I mean, he was shaking his fist, in approval and excitement at having won. But he's not whooping and hollering on the radio like we've heard some drivers.
Were you whooping and hollering on the radio up until the championship?
No, I was mine, the Oscar Piastri mold. I think the good old British stoic kind of.
That'll do.
So that's a jolly nice result, isn't it? I think. I was playing it down because I think there is an element of it's not. You don't celebrate till the job's done. let's keep your powder dry. Let's keep focused on what we're doing. This is just a stepping stone. And I think he is building himself a championship here in a way that I don't see Lando doing. Lando seems to be up and down. It's snakes and ladders with him. Whether it's still a close gap, but he needed to win this one. He cannot keep Oscar in his box at all.
Just when he had the chance to, after Austria, after Silverstone, it would have really made a statement. So a sublime drive, I think it has to be said for Oscar Piastri. I think his focus is laser sharp, and his time management skills have massively improved since his rookie year as well, which was really a key hindrance for him before.
And this is Prost-like. This is what Prost could do. Prost could feel every little thing. He could conserve things if he needed to conserve tyres. He's able to feel all that stuff. And I think that in that regard, I think the comparison is apt between Prost and Oscar. But he's also ruthless and decisive when it comes to overtaking.
So Oscar Piastri then extends his lead over Lando Norris to 16 points. Norris then, though, got overtaken at the start. It can easily happen, especially around Spa, and being on pole, even though it wasn't a standing start, but being the leading car on the first lap isn't really a benefit around this track, especially if like Piastri did, you get a really good run through Eau Rouge and up over the top at Raidillon. But for Norris, there were again a few little mistakes that creeped in that we saw, at least on the screens, and we didn't really see from Piastri. I thought Oscar was sort of almost metronomic in every lap time, was quite consistent. He was keeping Lando at bay. Lando had to dig deep at times to set those fastest laps, and then towards the end, a lock up here, slightly going deep here. He had a big wobble, didn't he, through Pouon. So am I being a bit harsh here? Are these little mistakes that we are continuing to see from Norris once again being shown?
It's more than that, though, isn't it, Harry? Because he had a radio message from his engineer, Will Joseph, sort of encouraging him to calm down a bit and to keep focused. Now, you wouldn't do that if you thought the guy could cope with it on his own. You'd be I don't know what you'd do. You would not be making a comment. I mean, do they need to make these comments to Lando? Was he pushing too hard? Is he unable to judge it in that way? And that remains a question.
There's a difference in tone, I think, isn't there? That especially we heard at one point during that race between almost the engineers, Tom Stallard for Oscar Piastri, Will Joseph for Lando Norris. There is a difference of tone, and Tom Stallard seems so aligned with sort of Oscar Piastri's mentality, delivers him information when he needs it. He doesn't need to give him any additional sort of G'ing up, let's say, that we've heard previously that Will Joseph might have to give to Lando.
That's right. I just think there isn't quite so much nursemaiding needed, for Oscar. It's just simply a discussion on a level between equals. The engineer is asking the driver and the driver's giving it back, and it's succinct, it's direct, it's pretty clear. And Oscar's tone on the radio is almost as if he's just, waking up and fancies a cup of tea sometimes.
It's not like he's driving around at a couple of 100 kilometres an hour, is he? Whilst it was his teammate who took the spoils, Norris really did give him a run for his money, but a few mistakes and ultimately ran out of laps to do it. Let's hear from the man who finished second.
Hey Lando, I could see how hard you were pushing, obviously, out there. I know you always do, but just how do you feel kind of after this race? You gave it everything, obviously didn't quite pan out.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I'm never going to be happy with the second place. At the same time, was my last chicane and turn one as good as they probably should have been? No. But would that have stopped Oscar from still passing me? It's impossible to know. He passed me so easily, the slipstream and the following effect, especially when you're the first car. You're kind of creating the first, we call it tram lines of water. And when you're the second car in the intermediate conditions or wet conditions, the lead car is a bigger disadvantage. It's great for the corners, it's not good for the straights. And maybe I paid the price for this, but I also didn't do the best turn one. So, I'll look into it and see if there's much more I could have done, or was it just paying the price for being on pole and paying the price for pushing my own air up to turn 5. We saw it on Saturday, from Max against Oscar, and that was with a good turn one, and now with a bad turn one, I still got overtaken. So, that's Spa sometimes. So I can't complain about a lot. And the way the race went from then on was a disadvantage just to be the second car, just with the strategy and things. So nothing really to complain about, or be disappointed about. I mean, I'm disappointed to be second, but sometimes that's just the way it is.
I know that the gap's obviously got bigger in the championship, obviously, but it feels like 3 successive weekends now where you are performing at a super high level. That must give you some confidence, because it won't always be Spa. You won't always have that long straight. So,
I mean, it's to and fro between us. The Oscars, we're both driving well. When we're talking about gaps, we're talking about hundreds and things like that, So I felt like I was good today. I felt like I was driving well. I felt like my tyre strategy was good and tyre saving pace was strong. So I felt like I had everything I wanted this weekend, and needed. Good quality yesterday, good pace today, but just the result of turn one just puts you on the back foot. And I'm like I said, I'm not too disappointed as well. Sucks to be P2, but I take it on the chin, and I look forward to Budapest, a track I enjoy, and like you said, I've had good momentum over the last few weeks, so I'll continue that. I keep working hard. My work's paying off, even sometimes when it's not as noticeable or you don't see it, but the work's paying off, so I just keep my head down.
Okay, so thanks, Andy.
So a 1-2 then for McLaren, and we should also reiterate, I think the CEO of McLaren, Zach Brown, has also said since the close of the race that Lando Norris did have a couple of battery issues on board his McLaren cockpit at the start of the race, so that may be a reason why Piastri was able to get by quite so quickly and early on in the race. But ultimately, the full points went to Oscar Piastri. And then really, they left the rest behind in their mirrors. Charles Leclerc finished third, which I think they'll be very satisfied with for Ferrari.
I think so. I think it's encouraging. They've made some changes that Lewis didn't seem to feel have made any difference. They've done something to the rear suspension, but clearly the Ferrari was a little bit better. I mean, the fact that it qualified up there in third and actually a little bit closer to McLaren's than maybe in the past should be encouraging for them. But it's such a difficult car. You can tell, they're not comfortable, those guys. I mean, Lewis, I think once he got into the groove of it, was able to do something with that car. It was a little bit misfortunate that he didn't get through into Q3. So we never really saw his ultimate pace, but Charles couldn't fight he could keep ahead of the Red Bull though. I mean, that's a Red Bull with upgrades as well, with Max Verstappen driving at Spa. So
and in those changeable conditions at the start, I thought when Charles Leclerc's intermediate tyres were literally falling apart, crucially, he was able to stay in front of him.
Yeah, you really would put money on Max getting past him, wouldn't you? So he'd done a fantastic job there in the Ferrari. He's able to use that car to keep himself ahead of Max.
Well, let's hear from the third place man, Charles Leclerc.
Charles, congratulations on the podium. You had to obviously defend and push really hard today. Just how hard was it out there?
Very, very tough. From the first lap to the last lap, I would say that maybe the toughest part of the race was the first part of the race, because with the downforce difference we had with Max, it was very, very difficult to keep the car on track, and I was struggling to put the tyres in temperature. But then as soon as they got into temperature, I could pull away a tiny bit, and that was enough for me to stay in front. But that wasn't it, because then we went on the dry tyres and he was still there. So it was an interesting race.
I know that you've obviously got the deficit to the McLarens up front, but can you take a lot of positive in the fact that you're at least maximising what you can, and it's still a strong result considering where the car is?
Definitely. I think we should be proud of what we have done this weekend. With the upgrades this weekend, the team has gave us some confidence inside the car, at least on my side, and I'm happy with it. So it's a small step in the right direction. Many more steps needs to be done, but we are working in the right direction.
Charles Leclerc led third and managed to keep at bay a chasing Max Verstappen. I almost expected a little bit more from Max Verstappen for this race. Loves this track, loves these conditions, winning the sprint. Obviously, that was dry, but couldn't get past that Ferrari, even with some new upgrades on board. Yeah,
very disappointing Max Verstappen performance there. We'd expect more, didn't we?
P4, is that it?
I was surprised, actually, watching all the cars around here, how difficult they found it to race, even though they might have been right up behind someone. To get past someone around Spa now is quite difficult, and I have to say that it's probably down to what they've done with the aerodynamics over time. They've made these cars rob the car behind of so much more downforce, and that was the original intention of the change to these kind of aerodynamics, was that it would make it possible for cars to get closer to each other. But over time, I'm afraid that has been eroded away. And now you've seen it at Spa this weekend, that in the dry, it's very difficult to follow a car closely through the middle section of the circuit and even get a toe on the straight.
Yeah, and for Max Verstappen in the end, he was kind of resigned to just being behind Charles Leclerc, tried to put the pressure on him. They really had a race-long battle between the two. But for Max Verstappen, P4 has only scored one podium finish in the last 6 Grand Prix. That came back in Canada, so still waiting for that next one. Let's hear from him, though, speaking after the race.
Hey, Max. Well, you gave everything, tried to chase Charles down. Just talk me through that process and whether or not you felt at some point you could do it, or did it become quite clear it would be very, very difficult?
Yeah, I mean, of course, on the inters we were a bit faster, and actually also because of the setup that we had on the car, it was just very tough to pass. I mean, at one time I was really close going into a Rouge, but you lose so much downforce when you are behind. The car becomes really unstable, so you couldn't really keep it on the road. And then, we went on to the slick tires, and to be honest, every lap I just felt like Charles was actually pulling away a little bit. Then I think he had one big mistake where he lost maybe 1.5 seconds, so that's why it looked like I was back in the fight. But realistically, I never really felt that I was in that fight. Of course, I always try to get into the fight, but today, partly because of the rear wing that we chose, because we barely did any wet laps at the end, which of course, in general I think is a shame, because I think we could have started way sooner. That's not ideal, but I think our biggest problem is still how we keep our tires alive throughout the race. We're just not strong enough on that.
How do you reflect generally on the weekend? The sprint, obviously you got that win strategically and operationally, you just did everything right. Obviously still not got quite enough for the McLarens, but generally how are you feeling about things and the pace of the car and where you're at?
It's of course not where I want to be, but we are trying. We're trying to be better. Yesterday of course was a positive result for us, but it of course is not a realistic result because we are way slower. But today I tried, all in all, of course, with the decision making and then also the setup of what we chose with the wing didn't help. But nevertheless, I think P3 was probably the maximum possible with the ideal scenario. Unfortunately, it didn't allow us today.
Great, thanks, Max.
Max Verstappen then, who finished 4th, and actually, well, for Oscar Piastri, who managed to get a 31 race scoring streak with that win. It's now the longest of any driver in F1 history other than Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. And that leads us actually quite nicely into Lewis Hamilton. We've mentioned it already. A tough weekend so far. Salvaged, I think, even though it was only 7th place. I'd still call that salvaged for Lewis Hamilton.
Considering where he started, what was it? Next, 3
pit lane initially,
Pit lane, yeah. So great decision to go onto the slick tyre early. I think when you're at the back, you've got nothing to lose. He's had such an awful weekend. He can gamble. He took a bit of a gamble going what would be, I would say, early, but it paid off. And he just scythed his way through about 6 or 7 cars and got himself up into the top 10. Wasn't able eventually to make much progress once he got stuck behind Alex Albon in the Williams, which is a very slippery car. But having said that, I was looking at the speeds, and the Ferrari was one of the fastest cars down the straight. So he maybe ran with low downforce. I don't know.
Well, no, they put him in the pit lane. They changed some power unit elements, and they would have been able to change the setup then by having that pit lane start after being knocked out from Q1 due to violating track limits. Had to make it count on his second flying lap and was done for it. So rather disappointing on that front for Hamilton, and the sprint quali and the sprint race wasn't much to write home about either. Trialling new upgrades, hearing some new brake pads as well that Hamilton's having to get used to, and I feel like this is a recurring trend that we're seeing this year. It's Lewis Hamilton just having to get used to these new surroundings, and it's clearly taking him a while to do that. And is this just further emphasis on it's not about this year for Lewis Hamilton. It's all on 2026.
I think this year is almost a bedding in year. I mean, I know you should you can understand why people think you can, if you're quick, you just jump in and off you go. But these cars are so complicated. And when you've spent 10, whatever it is, years at Mercedes doing things a certain way, it takes an awful lot to get out of that mode of thinking. And all the switches are in a different place. Loads of things you have to think about. And the way that the brakes work and the car feels, all these things are alien to you. And quite apart from the fact there's a lot of people are speaking Italian, and he doesn't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how good his is.
But I mean, it is difficult to bed yourself in, and he's got a lot on his shoulders. I know he's 40-something years old now, and he's a 7/8 times world champion. But nevertheless, you still feel it. He wants to deliver. It's awfully hard when you've had a bad qualifying and you've got all this responsibility on your shoulders. I don't care how much experience you've had. That is a tough one.
Well, let's hear what he had to say after finishing 7th.
Hey Lewis, well I asked you about if there's been some Lewis magic today, and I felt we got that today. There were some really cool moves early doors. You must have had a lot of fun out there.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I definitely did. I mean, I always enjoy those sorts of conditions. It was massively tricky being that far back in conditions where at the beginning it was really not that easy to see, but and then we had the rolling start, which I don't think they needed to do a rolling start. So, and I don't really know why they did that one, but because it had dried up quite a lot and the spray wasn't that bad. So, but anyways, I'm happy to have come from all the way back there, recovered and got into the points. Not the result that I want this weekend, and definitely a weekend to forget. But positives to take from the car today. The team did a great job. As they always do throughout the weekend, and they did a great job within strategy today, so big thanks to them, and I'll try and do a better job for them next week.
On those positives, we talked a bit about the brakes recently. Do they feel a bit better today? Do you feel like we got
the settings better, and definitely, as you could see, I was feeling more and more confident bit by bit with more experience on it. So yeah, P1 practice 1 and straight into qualifying with these new brakes definitely caught me out, and definitely will learn from that.
Thanks.
Lewis Hamilton then finishing in 7th, so somewhat managed to save his weekend. And then I think we'll just pick out a couple of drivers that I thought had some pretty good runs. Of course, that coming in from the intermediate to change to the slick tyre really benefited some. But I think Damon, we've got to do a couple of shout-outs. Liam Lawson back in the points in 8th. Gasly managed to hold on to that final point scoring position. And Gabriel Bortoleto got his second points score of the year in 9th. So some good results for those midfielders.
Starting to be a bit of a habit for Gabriel Bortoleto. Liam Lawson showing he's holding his own against Isaac Hadjar. So good for him. And what did you say the other one was?
We had Gasly who held on for that final 10th spot.
Yeah, so
and he was being hounded for that, wasn't he?
Yeah, the Alpine. I mean, they need to make some progress, Alpine, but it's. Anyway, we'll see what will happen at that end, but they're fighting hard for these final points. They mean a lot to these teams.
So that is how the race unfolded. Just outside the points, Behrman, Hulkenberg, Tsunoda 13th ahead of Stroll and Ocon, Antonelli down in 16th ahead of Alonso, Sainz, Colapinto and Isaac Hadjar. All 20 drivers finishing that race, and Hadjar, unfortunately, the last of them. We go to Budapest next week, Damon, and it is now swinging back towards Oscar Piastri. What happens here now with those intra-team dynamics? We're going back to the place where Oscar Piastri scored his first win last year.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so yeah, he shares that with me then, because I've got my first win at Hungary too.
Something about Budapest.
There's a few of us actually out there. But anyway, he it swung back towards Oscar, as you said. Lando won previously at Silverstone. Will Lando win in Hungary? I think the thing is with Lando, what I find is when it comes to the race itself, I always see him as closing the gap on Oscar, and Oscar being chased in a race. That's my overriding impression of them when they're on the track during a race, is that Lando is the guy who's making progress, actually getting. But it's the decisive, seat of the pants moves that Oscar has, and his ability to pull something out when he needs it, that seems to be the edge that he has over Lando. Maybe it's confidence, I don't know. It's quiet confidence. It's not an arrogant confidence, but Lando it's going to be so tough. This is going to be a fight to the wire. I can't see them being much separated by much, and so it could be either of them that wins Hungary.
Oscar Piastri, the Alain Prost of this generation.
Yeah, well, I mean,
what does that make Norris?
Do you know,
Senna?
Well, I don't think it's a Senna. No, I don't know. I don't know quite. Let me think about that one. But I mean, they've still got. We must rule out that Hungary will be a circuit that could benefit something like Max Verstappen or even the Ferraris. You know, it's a very different circuit to Spa. Maximum downforce probably, and lots of corners, 180-degree corners. You know, so you're in the corner a long time. So cars that are kind on their tyres, that's McLaren, you know, will do well there. I think Mercedes will probably be dreading this one, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Mercedes have had a bit of a downturn in performance, although George Russell did manage to again salvage something at the end of this race. Russell finished 5th, just ahead of Alex Albon. Good race for the Williams driver too. All right then, David, I think that just about does it. Last thing, actually, driver of the day, your driver of the day. Who is it?
Well, I'm sorry, it's not Lewis, although that was the official driver of the day. But I think they have to say Oscar Piastri, I think, did an amazing job, an almost perfect drive to save his tyres, to get past, to get ahead at the early moment of the race when he needed to. Did everything right. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. I think it's full vote for Oscar Piastri on this panel. Right, that just about does us. Thank you for your company. Thank you for your company, Damon Hill, throughout the weekend as well. We will have all the sessions live next week across the Hungarian Grand Prix and the usual podcasts on the Checkered Flag feed as well. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.